Today we've rearranged the schedule a little bit according to your request. And so we're going to start off with the internal audit. Stan Sewell is going to talk about that, and then Stan, are you also going to talk about reserves here?
I can mention it.
All right, thank you.
Tell me where you want me.
Just up here. So the reason for the audience that's watching, the reason we brought this up is council received an internal audit report, one that we get every year. And we've asked that Stan explain it to us, go over it, tell us the thoughts behind this, the trends behind this. And then also, we've had several questions about reserves and what are reserves and talking more about that. So Stan will be doing that as well. So you're on.
I'm on, okay. First, let me say, I really appreciate the opportunity to do this. I know I'm allocated a very minimal amount of time, and I'm gonna do my best not to overextend myself. But I do appreciate the opportunity to sort of go over this and explain a little for those who might not realize, although I think most do. You know, first, why we do this. And this is the 10th year we put this report out. And the reason that we do it is it provides a very simple, quick method for the council primarily to get a grip on where the city is financially. And that's without having to have an accounting degree, being a CPA, or dig through the city's act for like all those detailed financial statements. And so we sum it up pretty well. Some folks that have done a lot more study than me came up with these ratios that we use. And they're actually very good, they're simple. And I don't know if we can pull up, whoever's controlling this, do we have, just so that folks can kind of, I know you all had this, this was emailed to you, yeah.
Okay.
If you go, if you can just go to Chattanooga.gov even. And then, so.
Well, while he's doing that, can I ask a question?
Sure.
So on the report, you have, and I'm not, like some of the terms, you've got a green plus sign, and some of them are a red negative sign. But like this green plus sign on near-term solvency, the green plus sign at the very bottom, it says negative. And then the red minus sign at the bottom, it says positive. I would have thought, I'm trying to understand the symbols here. I would have thought a red minus sign would have meant negative, but is a negative positive? Is that what you're saying?
No, and we lay this out in the report, and I understand, yeah, because it's footnoted and what these really mean. But when you see the red and green, that's how we compare to the benchmark cities. So we take an average of benchmark cities like Knoxville, Huntsville, Clarksville, and when we put the ratio for them, and we average that out. And so that red or green, if it's green, it means we're in better shape than our benchmark cities.
Okay.
And then down at the bottom, if you read the paragraph there where it sort of tells you what that ratio is about, and it says, this is in comparison to the prior year where we're looking at ourselves. So if we say,
So two things are happening at the same time? Okay.
yeah, so that little circle, the
Yeah.
colored circle, that's compared to our benchmarks. And I'll just go ahead and tell you, that was one of the comments I wanted to make, is that we had, for 2022, we looked really great on there's a lot of these ratios that have revenue as a component, and we look much better than we had in prior years. So now in 23, when we're comparing to 22, it makes us not look so good when we compare us to ourselves. So what drove that is we had an extraordinary amount of streets contributed to the city in fiscal year 22, and that comes in as revenue. So it just made us look, we had about $85 million more than typical come in street donations in 22. When we took that out, when we normalized that.
What do you mean by street
Yeah,
donations?
you need to back that out a little bit.
That's when we.
Define that. Streets.
That's when I guess developers, they donate the streets to the city and it becomes our asset and we
Okay.
own it.
We didn't annex streets.
No, they were given to us.
In case someone wants to
Yes.
try to go down that
Now you get to
road.
take care of, now you get to maintain them.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Now it's a
Okay.
burden. Yeah,
We built new neighborhoods.
Yes, so, right.
So growth.
It was just really abnormal. And so it was about $85 million more than normal that came in. So what we did is, not in this report, because in this report, we just, every year, we're doing everything exactly the same. We want it to always be comparable. But that was a flag. And so we inquired of finance. We said, what really drove this? And it turns out it's these street donations. So when I adjusted that out, I pulled out, I normalized that back to what would be a typical year. It flipped 3 of these that were reported negative to positive. So when we're comparing to ourselves. So we're actually, if you take that anomaly out, we look a lot better than what you're seeing here in the report in that respect. Okay. And so that was something that I had intended to mention. Anyway, if you look at, though, these ratios on the whole, just right up front, I want to say, what we provide is, first, we provide that comparison to our benchmark. Then we state down there, sort of in the bottom of each paragraph, how we compare to ourselves for the prior year. But what's really important, this chart we put to the right by each one of these ratio analyses, it's sort of where you can see trends. So that's what you really want to look at. You're looking at how are we looking. So you take that first one you see there, you can see we're kind of bouncing around. You might go up a little a year, down a little year, whatever. But on the whole, you can go back 5 years, 10 years. We're trending positive. The next one you see there where we had the dip, but then we come back up on the liquidity issue. Like there's nothing there really concerning. When you look at this on the whole, the city of Chattanooga is financially healthy. We're extremely healthy. We're overall, if you look at everything, we compare favorably to the benchmark cities that we have in there, and historically we're doing fine. Sometimes you might see something that looks like it's stagnant. You may see something that looks like it might be trending down. If you see that, that's why you have the benchmark information. So if you're maybe looking like, man, we're not really just moving up, or and there are a couple of these where the negative number is better, but that's when you look at your benchmark cities. So if you're still doing better than the benchmark cities, you're that are out there, even if you're not, maybe if you're just seeing things look a little stagnant, that's telling you we seem to be in pretty good shape. If we compare unfavorably to the benchmarks and we're trending negative on something, that's what this is for, because that's when you guys should be contacting your CFO and saying, hey, Javed, I need to know what's happening here. What's driving this so that I feel comfortable that we're not in. And that's the point of this, so that you guys have something really simple without having to just spend hours and hours trying to dig through financial statements at a detailed level. And that's the point of it. So I also would comment, we always footnote that we have EPB as a component in our financials. Mm-hmm. And it's a massive entity that most local governments don't have. So they might have a wastewater like we do, or some other enterprise funds, a water company, but EPB is massive. And so they took on a lot of debt when they put out the fiber, but they have serviced that debt wonderfully. They've done a great job servicing their debt. I don't see any risk there, but because it's in our financials, it makes our debt burden look higher. Mm-hmm. And all debt burden is, it's just debt per capita. It's the total debt divided by the number of citizens that we have. So if you pull EPB out of our financials to make us a bit more comparable to the benchmark cities, that flips that positive. So we go positive in the comparison. So that one's always showed up negative. Mm-hmm. But it's EPB, and EPB's healthy. So I'm not worried about that at all. And I think we go from where our benchmark cities run about $2,700 per capita in debt. We're at about $2,100 if you pull EPB out. So we're in much better shape than most of the other cities that you would compare us to that are out there.
So EPB is our outlier.
It is. If you pull them out, then that makes that. But that's the only ratio that it really impacts heavily, because they're running fine, they're doing well. They just have a lot of debt. But it's not a lot of debt for what EPB does. It's a lot of debt for what general government does, mm-hmm. and we put them into our financial statements, and so it just drives that up. So we always footnote that.
Is there, obviously they're part of the package, but is there a way, I know you have footnotes to make that more prominent to, if folks are looking.
Yeah.
Without them, this is positive. With them, I mean, without in this room stating that, because that could be read,
And we could,
misinterpreted.
we can look at a more prominent way to do it. We do footnote it, and we've been footnoting it the last few years. Honestly, because I know at least some council members actually look at this and pay attention to it, because the reason we started footnoting it is those first few years, every year, someone sent an email that said, oh my gosh, what is going on here?
Right.
And so we just started putting the footnote in the report so that people could see it. So could we do something where maybe instead of a footnote, we put a little bold sentence with that ratio comment in there? Maybe so.
I think that
logo or something.
I think that would be helpful
Yeah.
with this,
To
I mean,
flag,
because
make it a
even
little more prominent.
this footnote is vague. You know, business type activities are like, you know, because it is EPB primarily, so that would be, that would add a lot of clarity, I think.
So let's see, yeah, we talked about that anomaly from the street donations. There were also a couple of comparisons for '23 that were technically negative, but they were really, when you look from a materiality context, like it was just barely. But we've always, so even if it's just a tiny amount, if it trends positive, we report it positive. If it's negative, we report it negative. But there were a couple of those too that were just barely. It was from, we actually talked about the possibility of maybe in instances like that, just instead of saying positive or negative, just saying no change when it's just immaterial, so it doesn't really flag it that way. It's never been a problem because we've always been very positive, and always, you know, we're doing better and better every year, and nobody raises question. And you know, so like this year, a lot because of that anomaly we had with the street donations, it started, I think people were looking a little more because it's like, wow, we've got these negatives in here, so. And so, I mean, in general, that's kind of it. I think if you look at it on the whole, we're very healthy. As far as fund balance goes, that very first chart, the short-run financial position is really, that's exactly what that's about. It's about your revenues in context of your fund balance, your unrestricted or unassigned fund balance. And so if you ask me, and different people can look at things different ways, but the simple way of looking at it is if you look at your financials and you look at what's your unassigned fund balance. So your fund balance tells you how healthy you are really in general, and what's unassigned, where it's not restricted or dedicated to something. That's really your reserve number. We're at fiscal year end '23, we're at $129 million. Where do you want to be? It's relative. And if you look at some organizations like GFOA, what they will say is every governmental entity sort of needs to look at that internally themselves, and you assess the risks that you have. And that can be risks that are highly likely, and it can also be sort of these black swan events, which are things that you don't anticipate. And so you have to be prepared for both, and you have to make your own analysis as to where you should be. You know, my off the cuff to where like I'm feeling wonderful. If you told me where would I love to be, you know, I'd love to be at 6 months of general fund operating
Where are we
revenues.
now?
We're at 4.
That's healthy.
That's healthy.
okay.
What GFOA will tell you is you need to do that analysis yourself, but probably their minimum would be 2 months. We're at 4. You know, the analysis that our folks in finance and everything may come to, you know, who knows? They may say 4 is good, 3 is fine, 5, 6. Like I said, when I say 6 months, that's just kind of me, kind of off the cuff, because if I'm going to do it without a whole lot of detailed thought and brainstorming with people and going through that whole process, I want to be really safe. And I think about things like, you know, the only place you can really go where you can just do whatever you want to is your unassigned general fund, right? And but you're talking about the city as a whole. And so I think about things like a hacker gets into the SCADA systems or some other systems and they just melt down Moccasin Bend. Let's say they melt that down, and it can happen, folks. I mean, it has happened places. What are you going to do? Can you imagine how expensive that would be? Because people got to be able to flush the toilet. And so Other aspects that aren't so much black swan events would be just general. Think about when we had a few years back, we had the tornadoes, the bad storms. Those were, for anyone who was impacted by that, it was horrible. But honestly, it wasn't that bad when you consider how bad it could have been had there been more tornadoes in different areas, more populated. Well, we spent a lot of money. FEMA reimbursed us, but they reimbursed us like 3 years later.
Yeah.
You're right, so you're having to front end that. So those are the discussions you gotta have when you're talking about where do our reserves need to be. Maybe 2 months is all you gotta have. 4 months is where we're at, which I will tell you, that's healthy. When you look at that first chart, we're at 35+%, and our benchmarks are at 29. So we're in better shape than our benchmark cities, but don't think like it's not like we're at 50% and they're at 25, right? Like we're doing better than our benchmarks in terms of what we got out there in our unassigned fund balance relative to our revenues. But, we're higher than them, so is there room for us to maybe, if you wanted to scale back some, maybe. Would I feel more comfortable if we had more? Absolutely. It also, all these interesting, it helps with your bond rating. We've always been able to borrow money really cheaply here. I mean, we've been, and that's part of what they're gonna look at when they're rating us. We have an excellent bond rating, and that's part of the reason that we do.
Stan, let me ask you something. We have reserves in like water quality, that sort of thing. So that's not considered here because it's spoken for, is that correct?
Right. Now, we have some ratios that look into your business type activities too, separately down there. But when you're talking about the reserves.
How much is at risk if a lot of these are already covered by separate reserves?
Right. So that's part of that discussion you have about where your general fund reserves need to be, because you look at how healthy are the fund balances in those business type entities, how much can we rely on them, but what risk exposure do you still have, even if you say, okay, they can handle a black swan event, or can they? Do we need enough in general fund to make sure, because they don't have enough here? I haven't, in preparation for this meeting, I didn't look at the detailed fund balances we have in those, like for Moccasin Bend, but,
You mentioned Moccasin Bend, and I thought, common wisdom would say, hey, that's covered, because there's special funds for that, but maybe not.
When you think about the level of disaster, highly unlikely, but boy, if it did happen, the damage that would be there, it could be a major financial, it'd be more of a health disaster, but it could be financially very heavy burden.
Do you all want any special sessions on going over these funds to know more about them in the light that Stan's speaking of? We're going to be going over them, but more of an education session. Do we want to schedule? I mean, this is very interesting to me.
So these benchmark cities are based on the population similar to Chattanooga, right? The Knoxville, the Clarksville, and all that stuff.
Primarily, what we try to do, we try to look at kind of our area, kind of the southeast, and then our population in context with that. We've got one in there, Provo, Utah, that actually the mayor had recommended, because there are other areas where they line up well with us, although the population doesn't. But in general, yeah, that was the context of it. And they have shifted a little bit over time. We had two that we dropped for fiscal year '23 and added two new ones, because they were like a year and a half out from having their audited financials done. We just couldn't get the data for them.
So back again, do you all want to have any sort of an education session? Probably not before, or do you want?
I don't, you talking about for the,
To understand this a little better.
Councilman Burrs, I think that's a great idea, because we
Okay.
haven't in the last couple years really looked at each reserve fund and been educated as a council on it. I think it would be really useful.
Do you want this before our final vote on this budget, or is it merely an education session per se?
I would be comfortable either way.
Okay. What about the rest of you? Any thoughts?
I wouldn't mind diving into it maybe after.
Afterwards? Okay.
That way our minds could be a little more clear and we could take it on.
Well, a lot of
With
the
a deep breath.
decisions we're making, although it's good to know what these funds are doing, it doesn't really impact some of the basic decisions we're making.
Correct.
So why don't I make a note to ask the chair for that, to schedule that. Anything else?
I would add on that level, I would just add that I would recommend if you're gonna do that, let your finance team go through and do some analysis and have some stuff for you guys about where it's at and where they feel like it should be. And I think internally, and they probably have, for some reason, I want to think, at some point, we had a policy, whether it was formal or not, that we wanted to strive to hit 6 months. And that might be even why that number sticks in my head from years ago, but.
Where were we in 2008? Because we were in such good shape, we didn't have the fate of a lot of cities. Do you know what that level was?
I
Do you know,
don't
Vicki?
know.
I'm trying to move my cursor, because I have a slide on it and my cursor's not moving.
Okay. Well, it'd be something interesting, because that's the benchmark when Chattanooga raised above all other cities in being really solid
Yes.
with that terrible crash. I mean, that was worse than COVID. And it might be a good idea. So if we could include whoever's going to be doing this session when we schedule it.
I think one thing that we need to understand, and we're talking about unreserved fund balance as looking at it sort of as your savings account.
Yeah.
We don't have a line item budget for unreserved fund balance.
Well, it's just kind of where you end up.
It's all the reserves, it's the leftovers of what we didn't spend is sort of emptied into that. So, it causes us to be mindful of, very conservative, I think, on the front end, in order to have something left to put in the bank account at the end of the year. Because otherwise, I mean, there's not a line item that we have that dedicates money for our savings account.
That's exactly right. Ryan, do you all plan, I don't know whether it's you or Vicki or David, whichever, do you all plan, it's not a line item, but do you all plan for reserves?
I will say, Mr. Henderson hit it on the nail on the head, is we make sure that we only budget revenues that we're comfortable with. So if we receive more revenues, that will flow into the fund balance. That's the way we do it.
When you give budget to any department, hidden in there, and hidden's a bad word, you know what I'm saying? Is there wiggle room in there that could go into reserves?
Not budgeted.
It's not
departments.
planned, okay, that's all I
It
want
comes
to know.
from the revenue side, Jim.
Okay, thank
So,
you.
back to your question, I finally got my cursor working. Thanks to some help. So, I'm not sure what you were referencing, mid-2000.
2008,
Eight.
when we had that
That
big
9,
real
10.
estate crash.
Yeah, so you can see it was in the 20% range there. And the city policy, I believe, is around 15%, which, to Stan's point, that's around the 2-month minimum GFOA guideline, right? And that really is what I would say a minimum. And you can see 2009, 2010, because of needing to draw down, because of extreme circumstances, it was drawn down to that minimum. But since then, the city has worked hard to be above that minimum threshold. And I put the red line on here to indicate COVID, right?
Right.
Because since COVID, there really has been a national trend to be closer to that 4 to 6 month mark. And to Stan's point,
Ryan, is this a policy that needs changing? Or is a policy only deal with minimums?
well, a minimum can be raised, for sure. And so it could be a policy that needs
I guess I'm
changing.
saying, is this a minimum policy we have now? Or is that what I'm,
That's correct.
it's
It
not,
is a
it's not, we should be
Is-
around 2 months.
Is
It's a
the
minimum.
minimum's 10% of,
15.
15%?
yeah, which is 2 months.
Okay.
Yeah. That said, you know, we're a couple years removed from COVID now, and you know there could be opportunity as we get the other slide I put in here to Stan's point is around the benchmark cities, and it shows Chattanooga on the far left. It shows the average of the benchmark cities there in gray. So we're not too far off from our benchmark cities. But we do think that there could be some opportunity here to very carefully consider where there's some opportunity to adjust course slightly down, but not, we don't want to come back down to the 15-20% range. So we're slightly above average, slightly above most of our benchmark cities, and so there might be some calibration opportunity here.
So what I'm envisioning is we get this education session, and then we discuss policy around that. A much enlarged policy than what we're doing now. Councilwoman,
Ryan, do we know what practices are being done in Fort St. Lucie and Huntsville that we're maybe doing or not doing in comparison?
We have not pulled their policies.
Okay.
We also don't have their bond ratings. So, you know, there's some other data points here
Yeah,
that would be relevant.
it'd be interesting anyway.
For sure,
to see
yeah.
if what the differences were.
Right.
Okay.
go ahead.
So what draws down on the unreserved is basically putting that into capital projects.
I was talking to Javed about that this morning. There's a few different options there. You could, yes. The simplest answer is money towards capital. The other,
To prevent having to borrow.
that's the other piece, is right now we set aside, that's the next slide, right? This is general fund that goes over to capital, right? So there's a bit of a domino here where we said, well, instead of 20 million from reserves that go to capital, we could actually do a domino effect that, because we actually also have some operating fund dollars that are going towards capital as well. And so we could put a bit more of reserves towards capital and free up a little bit more operating fund dollars. So there's a couple different options we could do here if we were to draw down the general fund reserves. But again, those are strategic decisions that we have to think through. So
This slide shows us, not the balance obviously in reserves, but what we're pulling from, because I'm seeing the 20 million.
Pulling out of.
Right.
What we cannot do, just to be clear, is take reserves and just put them to operating dollars.
Right, yeah.
Right.
Can't be reoccurring.
That is what rating agencies will greatly frown upon. Okay.
One-time expenses.
Yes.
Basically.
Yeah. One-time expenses or offsetting one-time expenses is essentially what you're looking to do.
So I think what you're saying is where we are now, our policy says whatever, we have to stay at 2 months operating expenses.
That's correct. That's the floor.
And that's what allows us to take some out of capital, even if it's going toward 4 months expenses or whatever. And so we need to decide, do we want to do that? I'm not talking about this budget, I'm talking about
Ongoing,
practice.
yeah.
Okay.
That would be a wonderful finance committee.
I think
Session
let's
to
do
put-
it. Let's
yeah.
get through this,
Yeah,
and then I've
obviously.
made a note.
I would love to talk more about that.
Okay, all right. Let's do that, and I also made a note to look at our current policy, and do we need to massage that a bit? Any other questions for
Anything
Stan?
else, Javed or Vicky, that I've misstated or maybe you'd like to clarify? Okay.
And just to let everybody know, the ordinance does have these dollar amounts in there. If you look at the draft ordinance, page 8 will tell you what the reserve is.
80.
At page 8 of the page 80, I think if I remember correctly. In addition to that, all other funds also in the book has the reserves shows in there. So whether it's wastewater, stormwater, any other enterprise fund also have in the book, we say that what is the reserve for them. And I'd be happy to, walk you guys through it whenever we.
I think it might probably be a
Hotel
good
motel
idea.
tax,
All of them.
Huh?
Always,
hotel motel tax.
always
Hotel,
fund something,
motel.
right?
So, what you're saying, I think, is that there's our basic reserves, and then these other funds also have reserves that are not included in the basic reserve.
Right.
It's not in the general fund reserve. Other fund, enterprise fund or internal service fund does have the reserve.
And to Javed's point, what I've included in here on this slide, that is not in Stan's report, is for, this coming budget, the blue bar is where we project to be. So in this budget, we project a fund balance, reserve of 34%. Okay, so that's where we currently project to be for this year, coming up, as of July 1, for the next budget.
That's
Any-
after removing
That's after all the,
20 million.
that's right,
Yeah.
after all that, yeah.
Any other questions or concerns? Stan, this was great. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
for having me. I do
And we
appreciate it.
will schedule whoever to come back and talk with us and when we talk about policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The next item on the agenda is something that you brought up that you would like to have. That's the council plan of work. You all have this. And I heard a couple of things. I heard that, for instance, with Councilman Ledford, a lot of his stuff has totally changed. It needs updating.
Yes, ma'am.
And you wanted to take a look at this because our mission statement, our plan of work should totally align with the budget. You know an organization by its budget, so that's what comes next. And I believe you all have the mission statement, plan of work. Councilwoman Coonrod is not here. Councilman Henderson, Public Safety Committee.
It is Councilwoman Dotley now.
Well, but that's you right now.
Is
To
this
make-
plan of work in our most recent packet? I know we've received it in the past, I'm just working to pull up my copy of it.
I don't have it in this.
You don't have it?
No, ma'am.
We don't have it.
All right, we'll make copies and we will move on.
Not in here.
All right,
Yeah,
so
we've received it.
what you wanted to do was update it.
Yes.
All right, and those of you that have a new committee, let's let the person that's been working with it for a year talk about it and say where we are. Okay, Mr. Chair?
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Let's move on. All right, the next department that we had was Parks and Outdoors. And if you will go back to this handout that you got,
Carol, did we not, I thought we did Parks and Outdoors.
We did
well,
that.
we did, there's one more thing.
Oh, okay.
All right.
I think we left off at early learning.
So we're doing Parks and Outdoors because there was one thing that was brought up loud and clear in the interim, so we put it back on. Ryan already knows about that. And that is the golf courses, which are a sort of quasi-enterprise fund. But there needed to be some discussion about them. Apparently, in the public eye, there's been a lot of discussion about them. And it had to do, well, Ryan, I think you gave a great explanation, why don't you?
Yes, I just shared it with you. There we go. Sorry, we're having some technical difficulties, but while we're
And Scott is here.
yeah, I think ultimately there's a great opportunity with our golf courses as we're kicking off an RFP for our recreation plan. So we did the Parks and Outdoors plan, which is great for planning, our parks and outdoors spaces. Now we need a recreation plan, and as an opportunity within that space, we want to, as a subset within the recreation plan, take a look at what's possible within golf. We've got some great golf courses that are municipal golf courses, and so there's some best practices around the country in terms of how those can be operated, and so we want to take a close look at that as a part of that recreation plan. So that really is the next step in that space. And Scott, anything you want to add to that?
You said that very well.
Okay, so that's where we are.
Okay, so there may be other discussion when we get to those special funds, but for those people who have a lot of energy around the golf courses, for sure they're number one on our list. We will continue public golf courses of quality, and as we redo budget and redo thinking, that will be at the top of the recreation list. Any other comments Scott, on that? Okay.
We see clarity in that mission zone. The not true narrative is that the golf courses have been run as an enterprise fund, and that's actually not true. They've been run as a revenue recovery fund operation, so they're half pregnant. So with Ryan's exact words, we're going to decide on the precise course of action that makes them sustainable for the long term.
Okay. And anybody that's watching that has a lot of great energy about these, please know that they're totally protected, and they'll be protected in quality fashion. Let's go to early learning.
Okay. Here's new slides. Anyone else want hard copy slides?
Did early learning slides change?
Just
What page number?
your electronic should be fine.
Okay, all right. I know we went to like page 86, I think was.
There you go.
We got one, two,
You want a hard copy?
please.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
There you go. Yes, sir. All right. Yeah, after page 56, I don't remember. I don't want to mess with it right now.
No problem.
Okay.
No problem, I will roll with you.
All right. Excellent. So early learning. Just a small increase of 57,000. Ultimately, this is just due to some change in attrition. A little bit, if it makes sense, less attrition budgeted this year than last year because they're more fully staffed. So that's kind of accounting and budgeting for you. But no change in authorized positions here. Obviously, there's a huge part of this department that is funded with federal dollars and that sort of thing. So, but city authorized positions, 17 not changing. So, that's really the highlights here. Any questions? Okay, we'll keep going. City planning. Thank you, Kritza. You ran out. All right. City planning. All right, city planning is showing a decrease of about $40,000. And again, I would just mention that this is different than RPA, two different buckets of money here. Similar as early learning, no change in authorized positions, still 8. Really, the decrease here is because pay increases have not flowed through yet, and because a large national dues that are paid to the National Association of City Transportation Officials has been shifted over to Public Works. So that's really what accounts for this decrease of $40,000. So not a lot of big changes here in city planning.
Any questions?
All right.
Equity and community engagement, there were a lot of questions about that you wanted to defer till now, and this might be a good place to ask them.
Yeah, and we also have some special presentations for next week as well.
That's right.
Around some of those topics, and I know Councilwoman Dotley had some of those questions, and she's not here, but really in terms of budget specific, you know, it's showing an increase of 48,000, no changes in positions here. Most of that increase is because of space costs at Midtown. The first year of Midtown, that rent was picked up centrally by Public Works. This year, all of the rent costs are getting spread to the departments, and so, you know, really most of that $48,000 is just space costs that's getting picked up by the department. So that's really it from a budget perspective. But I know, to your point, Councilwoman, I know we have some specific topics that we are planning on diving into next week.
So are you all satisfied with the topics that you really wanted to do the deep dive in? We set them for next week where we could really do the deep dive then and make sure that funding that we were doing was equitable, all those issues that you brought up. Does anyone need any more information right now? Next week will be a very detailed meeting and a lot of the questions that rightfully should be asked. When we're in economic development, you had a number of questions there as well. Let's go through it first.
Okay. Economic development. Here, I have Jermaine. We don't have Jermaine. Okay. Or Richard. Or somebody from economic development. Okay, that would be wonderful. Economic development. So this is showing an increase. Hey, Richard. Hi. An increase of 175,000. 34 authorized positions, 3 new. So what's driving that are these 3 new positions. Senior Advisor for Economic and Workforce Opportunities. I spoke about this a little bit in my budget presentation, but Richard, do you want to speak to that one and or these other 2 OSHA positions?
Come on and join us, Richard. If you
Sure. The Senior Advisor for Economic and Workforce Development will be a person who oversees both economic development and workforce development and reports up to the mayor. So we don't have anybody that has focused entirely on that with all the other departments that we have within economic development. So I'll continue to do that. This person will be focused solely on economic and workforce development. As you know, Quentin Lawrence left us and went to the Community Foundation and is still a partner with us and everything, but this person would backfill part of that as well. And we're refilling his position as well that was gone, that would report up to the Senior Advisor for Economic Workforce Development.
So Richard, when you're talking about economic development in English, what does that entail for people that are watching?
So the person would work closely with the chamber and with Hamilton County and with the state and with other economic development agencies that are in the area to help us identify and select people that could come and provide jobs in the community.
Okay. Any questions about, go ahead.
Does that position, Richard, tighten that connection with the chamber?
Yes, it does in Hamilton County.
Okay.
And what? Councilwoman?
So, did you say 3 new positions? Did I hear 3 new positions somewhere?
Yes, ma'am. 2 of the other positions are in homeless service coordinator and a physical analyst for the Office of Homelessness and Supportive Housing.
Okay, and that's gonna be 3 new positions in this budget, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so if my mind serves me correctly, did we say we were not having any new positions?
We didn't say that. We said this budget is as flat as possible.
Okay, so let me back up a minute then. So when I asked about the position for constituents, director of constituents here for the council, I know I heard something and someone said no new positions. But then I hear 3 new positions.
So if we zoom out across the whole city budget, we've got some departments that are up and some departments that are down. And as we look across all positions, all departments, we have a net up about 32 positions total, but that's only with the authorized positions for police and fire that we need to see if they are able to fill, okay? If you take those positions out, we're actually down, as a city, we're down about 7 positions or so with this budget. As you look across all departments. As you look at the total budget in terms of spending, the whole budget is up about 7 million, and that is almost all going into pay. So generally speaking, positions are pretty flat. Some are up a little, some are down. And the budget overall is pretty flat. It's only up really with pay. Some departments up a little bit, some are down a little bit. So, now how it comes to the city council budget, I try to stay out of that as much as I can, frankly speaking. But y'all have a certain amount of money that you had last year.
Okay, so, you went all around the mulberry bush with me. Okay, so my question was, says there was no new positions. Is my understanding, you said that to be had in this budget. But then out here, there's 3 positions. So that sounds like you're talking out both sides of your neck with me on that one.
Ma'am, it is not my position to tell council how many positions council
Okay,
can have.
okay, all right. Thank you.
Just to be clear, yes.
Just duly noted, okay.
Yes, ma'am. All right, thank you, Richard.
Hang on.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I want to, if I can go back to senior, but did you have a question? I'm sorry, Councilwoman?
Yeah, I have a question.
Let me yield, please.
Okay.
I've had a turn.
Go ahead.
Thank you. First, the senior advisor, so in addition to Quentin's work, Jermaine has been that senior advisor, so will that take on part of
It
what
will.
Jermaine did? Okay. The other question, the homeless services coordinator, I am remembering that last year we had some changes because we had some redundancy and we removed a position related to homeless services. So how is this tell me what work this one does that, remember when Sam left and we collapsed a position and?
If it's okay, I want to get with Casey and make sure I'm getting the correct information to you about the homeless services coordinator and the report, if they would, okay?
Okay, yeah, that would be helpful, thank you.
All right, there. Are they here?
He's not, but I'll get it
Okay,
and get it to you.
all right.
Yeah, well, he's in the vicinity, so he might be across the street.
So when you're talking about everything under economic development, real property,
Okay.
real property, what does that mean?
Real property, so real property handles all transactions for the city regarding property. So the acquisition, the disposition of properties,
Okay.
anytime there's anyone that's wanting to make a lease, to lease property or lease some of our property, then real property handles everything for us.
Okay. And then workforce development, I think you've already spoken about housing.
Housing,
Talk more about
so
that.
I'm gonna let Nicole is here for anything about housing. So we've got the affordable housing, and we also have any kind of housing funding that goes through that receives federal funding.
Okay. And then we're getting ready to hear about homeless support services,
You were
I
asking
think.
about the homeless services
Yeah,
coordinator.
go ahead and re-ask that question, Council.
Okay, so Casey, in last year's budget, we flattened a position because we had redundancy. Sam left and, so that there was some change. Help me understand what this homeless services coordinator is gonna be adding back here.
So last year, we eliminated the manager, the coordinator, and just had one director, which is the position that I'm in now. The homeless service coordinator is post-housing case management for people that are already housed or that we house. We are housing at such a record number that we can't keep up with the post-housing side of it.
Okay.
Right now, the coordinators have anywhere between 50 and 70 on their caseload, and it's just not manageable for them to provide case management for them for up to 1 year after their house.
Okay, all right, thank you very much.
Anything, yes, Councilman.
Madam Chair, if I may go back to senior advisor. This position is, I think, is pretty critical in attracting new opportunities for the city. Will this position, do you anticipate it also working with the county?
Oh, yeah, the county
Okay,
and the
'cause
state too.
that I feel like that we really need to
No, that's
tighten that
solely
one up.
focused on that, right.
Okay, very good. Thank you. That was a good answer.
Okay, anyone else? Thanks, Richard.
Thanks.
All right, thank you guys. I'd also mention that Richard's done a good job reducing consultant fees by $200,000 and contracted operations by $100,000 to help afford some of this. So, nice job.
Way to go, Richard.
Thank
job.
you.
Thanks.
All right, good stuff. We'll keep going. IDP, I think, is our last department before we get into even more fun stuff.
Join us over here if you want. It's really not that hot a seat.
I think this will be fast. Tim's just joining us for fun.
Yeah.
He wanted to change the scenery here.
Hey, Ryan,
Yes, ma'am.
maybe can somebody send me a fresh deck of slides, cause mine end on page 56. Julie, do you have the fresh slides? You could just email
Is
me.
yours PDF or something?
It just ends. It's 54 pages. Thank
Alright,
you.
Julia
You
will-
need it too?
Hang on.
Refresh ya.
57.
That's surprising, but okay.
Oh, you know what I did?
Nope, I'm
You
good.
told me not to look at the ones after that because they might change,
Yeah.
and so I deleted them.
Oh, you created your own copy.
Well, yeah, I made
Yeah.
a copy and
Okay.
then I got rid of the ones.
slide deck with all of you.
There
It's
you
the
go.
most current ones,
Yeah.
because I didn't want you signing up for something you didn't sign up for.
Appreciate that.
You're
Thank you very
welcome,
much.
I'm a
Yeah.
helper.
You follow orders
I
well.
I'm pretty compliant until I'm not.
They said delete it, you said, okay.
Ryan, for the record, I did not. I kind of.
See, I knew she would
Compliant
take
until
notes
I'm not.
on the slides.
That's exactly- yes.
She saved her own copy, which is great. So, all right. IDP, very flat budget. So here you can see they going up a whopping $729. Yeah. Positions staying flat. Really here they are swapping, the story is they're swapping a program evaluator for a customer service rep in 311. And so I think that's a good story because it's helping our 311 team stay up with responsiveness and timeliness for our residents, which is important. So they're expanding the 311 team a little bit. And I think that's an important story to tell there. So really that's there's other pluses and minuses here, but that's what I wanted to share with y'all. So, any
So one
questions?
of the things we've been really interested in, and I think it's in your wheelhouse, obviously, is impact.
Mhm.
And we'll hear a lot of that next week,
Right.
I imagine. What are your thoughts about how we can, I was looking through a lot of areas of the budget. I noticed that council way back had talked about quarterly capital fund reports, quarterly this, quarterly that reports. And with COVID, and this isn't a criticism, it is we fell short in saying, hey, what happened to the blah blah report with RFPs or whatever, now that RFPs are in departments. How do we, and this is really an open-ended question, how do we stay abreast of how we're doing based on what we funded, and is it meeting the needs anticipated?
Are you talking budget overall or agency specific with RFPs?
Well, my colleagues may have different interests that they have. So one of the things that's loud and clear is impact. We keep hearing it over and over and over again. How does it impact? In fact, I was making a speech out in the community and we were talking about, what they were talking about is impact. This isn't criticism of anybody's anything. It's how does a sophisticated community, which we're becoming, how do we know that the dollars we spend for, name it,
Dog catcher.
it could be dog catcher, it could be whatever our citizens, our residents, our people that stay here, whatever title, quality of life. So a budget, as I've said over and over again, you know a corporation by its budget. And we have an obligation, we're gonna be going over our work in a minute. How do we know that what we're voting dollars for in good faith is having the impact that we intended?
So that is a very hard question to answer. Generally speaking, we have an idea that we want to achieve something, right?
Okay.
And so we create programs and services and things related to that. And the idea is if we do these things, we get this thing. If this, then that. The easy part is if this part. That's the measuring kind of what we're doing currently, right? And we do a pretty good job of measuring those things and understanding how we're doing and kind of staying on top of that and seeing, you know, how things are going. Like I can only give an example for my department, but like 311, we're looking at call response times, right?
Okay.
And so we think we're having an impact and making a difference in Chattanoogan's life if we're being responsive and quick on answering calls so they can get the service they need. So we have pretty good data about that. Now, impact might be something, you know, very different than just like the call response time. Like our streets smoother, the potholes removed, you know, all these other kinds of things. And so that, if this, then that part is the harder part of the equation to get to that part.
Well, and that makes me think about Stan's citizen
Yep.
survey that he does. once
Community
a
survey.
year.
Community survey.
Community survey,
Yep.
sorry, thanks.
I love that thing.
Which is insightful, you know, and it could be an interesting, so we look at it, you know, as a leadership team and try to glean, okay, how should we adjust our operations? And it might be an interesting dialogue to have with council, or even council in the strategic planning session around, you know, what does it mean? I think it could be a collaborative conversation around what does it mean, you know, because I think some of it is, well, because obviously you all have your own perspectives, but this is clearly what residents are saying in terms of impact. It's not one-to-one, but I think it's somewhat getting at what you're saying.
Councilman?
So, and I think what you're getting at, and let me give you, I'll just give you two areas that I'm interested in, impact. One is the ARP dollars that we spent. We received $38 million of funding from ARP.
Sure.
We sent that out the door, mostly in the form of agencies. You know, I seriously would like to know what kind of impact that $38 million has had
Sure.
on the community.
We're gonna have that next week, right?
We should be able to.
I mean, it's
measure.
on the agenda.
That's for the
next-
I think what he's been looking at is more so the RFP through the departments, in terms of that's what's been measured. That's a separate topic around the ARP dollar impact. I think that's something that has been, you know, the grants group folks have been having to constantly measure that impact in terms of reporting up through the federal government and all of that.
Well, I think impact is more than reporting
Sure.
the dollars and whatever. The impact should have been what difference did it make in the community?
Right.
We
think
spent
my point is,
$38 million.
I agree. I think there's metrics that also are being tracked there, but I think that's a different group of funding.
The other thing that I'm not sure, since I've been on council, we've ever gotten is the impact that pilots are having on our budget, whether that be negative or positive. You know, every pilot that comes before us, we have an economic impact. And it's all rosy. It's gonna bring millions of dollars into our coffers. But yet this is a flat budget year. So I wanna understand why with all the pilots that we've granted, why our budget is as flat as it is. Where are all of those economic dollars that that the chamber came and reported that was gonna impact us.
Those are righteous questions, and one of the questions I would add to that is now that we've gone to RFPs, they're 4-year contracts. I wanna know at the end of the first year, the second year, the third year. I wanna know why we're just blindly renewing these things when we don't know if they've made a difference. And this came to the fore when my colleagues started asking questions
Yeah.
about various areas of enforcement.
Yeah, and we have time on that next week.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
But I just, heads up, that's what I'm looking for.
sure. Okay.
Particularly the art money. So, Agency A, who's doing a terrific job, is getting money from all kinds of pots. I want to know in total how much money Agency A is getting, and are they making a difference? Are we replicating areas? Are we still helping to engender silos or competitive silos? Because we do have a flat budget, which means every dollar does count. And it's supposed to serve people. And I'm just wondering how we can get a hold of that, because that's what we vote on. You know, so it's a tough question, I know, but can we have that for next week?
Yeah, we're preparing an overview of the different agencies, what they're getting funded for, and a deeper dive into the performance of the agencies with RFPs. So we'll have that for next week. And I think a question we wanted to get at today was if we wanted 1 or 2 or 3 agencies to come and speak specifically about impact. If there were some specific agencies that, we wanted to come really put meat on the bone, so to speak, because I'm not sure we have, if the council wants to have all agencies come and speak about impact, but if there were some that there was particular questions and concern about, then, we wanted to give those agencies some notice that they could come next week and speak about their impact.
I haven't heard, other than enforcement, animal control, that's what, I haven't heard it, but this is a good time if you all want to hear from particular agencies. The RFPs in departments, the ARP funds, is there anything in particular that you want to hear from? I think, my thought is, I don't know, but that we get the same sorts of reports. We served 2,000 people and we did this.
Yeah, that's what we usually get.
Yeah, and that's what we hear. That's not what we're asking. It's, did you make a difference? Yeah. What is the impact? And I don't know who to talk. If we have agencies that are dealing with, I don't know, just off the top, street crime or kids off the streets, then do we have the police come and talk about it's made it? Who comes and talks about it's made a difference? I really need help there.
Well, that was my point. If there are 1 or 2 that you were particularly concerned or interested in, we would have the agency themselves come and explain.
What's your pleasure, gang? What do you want to do?
I wonder if that wouldn't be better served by doing it throughout the year with some kind of quarterly reports.
I agree.
As we're going through
Yeah.
and bring them, most of them in at least, and
I agree.
then we talk about what kind of impact that they
What do
have,
you
as opposed
wanna-
to,
What do you want to do about, you're the one that mentioned the big clumps of money, the one-time things that people are
ARP
getting.
dollars.
So do you want to hear about it before you vote yea or nay, or?
No, I just wanna
Okay.
hear, like I said, I think through the year, we need these agencies to come, even the agencies that get ARP dollars. So that really and truly, we ought to be preparing through the year for next year's budget.
Sure.
By the time we get here, we should have known
Where everything stands.
what they're doing.
Okay.
And we're just reviewing to try to catch up and, do all that before we vote, I think is a pretty big task. But through the year, scheduling these,
Okay. Councilman?
I mean, that's my opinion.
So my question for Ryan and Tim combined is, we have an amazing amount of data. We have fantastic folks pulling and combining this data. Do we combine this into some sort of Reader's Digest format that is based on, I'm glad you mentioned the community survey, because I just think that is a very important document. And out of this data, do we consciously promote policy suggestions? Or do we just have data for data's sake? And I know that sometimes policy suggestions probably do trickle out and I get that. But I mean, as a collective effort, are we combining these, using this data in order to formulate a kind of a stepping stone to policy change?
Which data are you referring to? The community
Overall.
survey data or just in general?
Well, actually, I'm glad. Are we pulling? The second part of that question could be, Ryan, is are we implementing the data that we collect, identifying key areas, and then having those questions plugged into the community survey? That was actually one of my questions. Or are we pulling strictly from the community survey? I mean, I should have asked Stan while he was here, but I've always had an interest in the community survey because it was interesting. If you see year after year, the results come back, and although we have 9 different districts, we're all one city, and the number one thing that always comes back is road paving. And it's fascinating to see how we all fall in the common denominator. And then we move into public safety. Yeah, we move into public safety usually after that, but it's always that's my question, and it's kind of it's more of a rhetorical question for you than a specific, but it feels like good policy change and suggestions would come out of that information.
I know on the community survey, they try to keep the questions the same, so you have the kind of year-over-year comparison, and they usually have 1 or 2 flex. So
Right.
that if you have a new thing that's coming up, it's kind of bubbling up, you can
Correct.
kind of inquiry about that. So I think that is something that's there. We look at the data all the time, and we are trying to make the connections between data and policy. In fact, we have a monthly get-together where we have data nerds and policy nerds eat pizza together.
Yeah,
so
sure.
They can say, like, what policies are we working on, what data are we doing, so that we can actually kind of like connect those silos in a way. So it's definitely something that we're interested in, and there's many examples of us using it. I just have to like come back to you on like maybe specifics as far as like what data is kind of driving what policy.
Would it
and
be
such.
possible for us to be privy to some of that findings at your conversation? I would love, that's why I went back to the Reader's Digest.
Yeah.
I would actually read that. Hey, what have you all found trending somewhere that we could find an interest in trying to work together and massage the policy or change the policy for a better outcome? I would actually read that, believe it or not.
I'm
And
wondering, how about a discussion? The thing is that if we were privy to that, it goes with some of my colleagues saying, hey, we're the legislative arm, we're the policy arm. Why are we always receiving them as opposed to engendering them? And why couldn't we meet on a regular basis once a month at strategic planning? Because that's what strategic planning is for. Tied in with our mission statement,
help us help you.
that would be a fabulous discussion. For instance, if our mission statement has nothing to do with what y'all are thinking needs to happen, and policy comes from the legislative branch, then why wouldn't we all be sitting together talking about this?
And because we're we're out there, and y'all aren't in the meetings with us when we're sitting around with 50 and 60 neighbors at a time, absorbing frustrations, complaints, whatnot, and sometimes accolades. So
well-
it would be interesting. I would love to be. What's that?
Very few times.
Very few times. Yeah, we treasure. We do treasure. Well, but it's a place for the community to connect to the city, and we're the front lines.
No, I think
let's
it's
be
a
honest.
good point. We've talked a lot about how to build out a very robust listening function, because between what y'all do, the surveys, 311, what Kim does, the mayor's office, on and on, right? We have a lot of input.
Yeah.
And we have to get better at figuring out a more systematic way of identifying trends.
Yep.
And problem solving,
Yep.
turning that into policy.
Yep.
And so on and so forth. And
Okay.
so I think we're on the same page. And so I think we'll take that and continue to iterate on that, Councilman. I think it's a great point.
Thank you. All right. Awesome.
Great,
Thank you.
Great point.
Yeah,
Thank you for
I would like all of this work that you're doing to, not the private discussions, we all have discussions about things. But if we're the policy engendering arm or the law, then it would be really nice if once a month we shared, or you shared with us
Yeah.
what, because we don't have the ability to do what you have the ability to
Well,
do.
and I know you're a process person, and like I said,
Yeah.
I think it's about making it into a process.
Right.
And,
Right.
and make it a process, so.
Okay.
Great, okay.
Anything, what, the innovation projects, where are you going with that?
The Innovation Fund or something?
It says innovation projects.
Yeah, so we have an innovation office, and we're trying to make the whole city more innovative. And part of that is by having individual projects, like kind of short temporal projects, maybe helping someone with their payroll process, or basically anything they want to do. And so it's a add desired process for folks to come in and say, hey, we need help with this or that, and we'll figure out what they need and come in and help them. So that's the innovation projects, and then we run other things like what we did with UTC recently. So we partnered with their honors college to actually test out, have their students work on real city problems and come up with prototypes as part of that, and so that they're kind of sharing that knowledge and information with us that we then roll into next year's and into the department's work. So that's another example of kind of a project type of thing that we're working on through the innovation office.
So a big innovation that I'm really excited about is traffic light timing.
I wouldn't call that an innovation, but it's a
Well-
3-year project in the
I was
making.
thinking about that yesterday when I was trying to get to the Memorial Auditorium, and every light was
Oh
different.
my God.
Coming down here today, I had the same thing.
I feel like I'm taking a tour of Market
Lord.
Street every time, yeah, and I really appreciate it when I don't take a tour, when I get to just drive down that road, but, and obviously, the Fraser Avenue lights timing is a big contributor to congestion on that street and will be integral in making sure that the new traffic pattern works, but am I understanding correctly that that has been moved out of technology and now into public works, and is your department involved with that? Like, when we looked at all the smart cities stuff, it just seemed like by now our traffic signals should be smarter than they are.
So it's actually on the council agenda.
Yes, it is, more money.
Finally, well, no, that's the study, that's actually the action of sequencing the lights, finally, after 3 years.
Oh, so we haven't been doing it at all for 3 years, I thought, okay.
Though there's been incremental movement on it. That's been what I would call the manual efforts of the Smart Cities team, kind of intersection by intersection. But this is a citywide comprehensive traffic light synchronization study that is now finally, it's had to go through multi levels of government to get funding and approvals and all this kind of thing. And so finally, after literally 3 years
Of studying,
Of-
now we're going to time our lights?
well, no, of authorization and working, it's getting finally approved and funded, and that's what's on council agenda for, I think it's today.
Today.
Yeah, So it's coming, and finally, in short order. But that's supposed to be done, I think, every 7 years or so, and it's been 20. So
I believe that.
Chattanooga is way overdue, and so the mayor has made that a top priority since coming in office. And unfortunately, the layers of bureaucracy at multiple levels of government, it has taken 3 years. So, but we are on the doorstep.
Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah,
Thank you, Tim.
yeah.
Anything else? Other funds?
Other funds, yes, thank you. Only a few, but we can go through most of these pretty quickly. Let me get to my notes here. Thanks, Tim. Other funds. All right, we've already talked golf courses. This is the overview of other funds. Generally speaking, and I mentioned this during my presentation a couple weeks ago as well. When the funding and spending don't match, it's because capital dollars are being taken from reserves and being put towards the spending, if that makes sense. So that makes it look like it's out of sync, but that's what's happening. So you can see I have a final column there around whether there's a rate increase. A lot of these, if they did have a rate increase, would not be felt by residents. They would be internal rate increases. But wastewater is the only one that has one, but that's just as expected since the consent decree. So nothing unexpected there. Moving on, and I do have, the asterisks here are the ones that I created, or the budget team created a separate slide for to get into more detail. So, economic development. Let me jump down here. What comprises this $20.8 million? Where is that $20.8 million going? So, $9.5 million is going to capital. So we'll hit that when we get into the capital budget here shortly, or maybe after lunch if we have a break here. $7 million to the Southside Development Debt Service, $2.6 million to economic development support. That's some agencies and some other entities. So we'll look at that in the next slide here. And $1.4 million is going to contingency. And there's a $200,000 fee to Hamilton County.
Ryan,
Yes, sir.
the 1.4 contingency, what are we anticipating needing a contingency for?
We carry, the contingency is not specific to the Economic Development Fund contingency, correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's just the city's overall contingency. We carry about a $4 million contingency every year. Is that
We
right?
do keep a little bit in economic development.
As
just
well.
Because you never know what's gonna come up for economic needs.
So, okay, thank you for correcting me, Vicki. So what that means is, hey, you know, new Amazon headquarters wants to come to Chattanooga, and we've got to have some money to put into it. You know, I'm just making something up, but essentially a big economic development project comes that the city's got to have some money to put some skin in the game, and that's where we would draw from.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
So,
Yes, sir.
have we had that in yours? I don't remember this being in prior year budget.
I believe so.
But
I haven't called
can we
that.
get, I mean, I would like to see, maybe over the last 3 or 4 years, what was spent out of it and what for.
Okay.
The contingency, you mean?
Yeah,
Or the
yeah.
overall fund?
The contingency in economic development.
Oh, what, you're just asking if it was put towards project, economic
He
development?
wants to know what it was used for.
What it was used for? Yeah, I got you. Okay.
What it was used for,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
if we use it or.
And if it's not used, to your point, my guess is it goes to the fund balance, which then the next year can go to support capital.
Correct.
Is that accurate?
Correct.
Yeah, but we can get what it was, which years it was actually used. Yeah.
So it doesn't just sit there and.
And so the question is, and it may probably be too late, but is there funds left over from this current year's budget?
If so, it's getting
24.
put towards the capital there. But, yeah.
As you pointed out, one of the years that we did not budget for Ironman and all that it contributes to the community, it came out of contingency, so that's an example.
Okay.
All right, back to this. So the 2.6 million there, I'm gonna get into with that breakdown here on this slide. So, do we have Jermaine? Kevin, okay. Maybe Kevin can help with some of this if I need. But this is the breakdown. Everything, there's only 2 new items on here. So you can see essentially what we've done is on the top part of the slide, we've tried to make a little bit of room for these 2 new items on the bottom, if that makes sense. So the 2 new items are the Quantum Collaborative and the UTC Center for Regional Economic Research. So, so we made some slight downward adjustments on the top part in order to make room for those 2 on the bottom.
Yeah, Councilman?
Ryan Carter Street's been on the budget for as long as I can remember.
Yeah, and that is expected to be a 1-year
Hiatus?
Yes, in conversation with them, they felt like they could, they had enough of a fund balance this year to make that happen, but, you know, that's not necessarily an ongoing,
Sure.
you know, situation, so.
Anything else on that? Yes.
Why aren't we still even contributing to Thrive?
So that's a regional economic development entity where, so.
Yeah, I mean, I
we
understand
see-
that, but-
We see value in the regional economy growing. I think is the short answer to that. I don't know if, again, Jermaine's not in here, or Kevin has any additional.
I don't. I know that Jermaine spoke with folks at both at Carter Street and at Thrive. I'm not sure the outcome of those conversations.
I would like to know what benefit we've gotten out of it, out of Thrive. I mean, it just seems like it's a big PR. I mean, I get, you know, I just can't imagine we draw business as a region more than we draw as City of Chattanooga and Hamilton County.
Yes, sir. We'll follow up with you on that.
Actually, what I've done is I've put these for next week. Next week, we want reports on economic development contingency, what it's been used for, and then Thrive, what are the benefits of Thrive? So that all the reports we're given will be given to everybody as a whole, not just private.
One or 2, gotcha, okay. All right, any other questions on this slide? All right. The next fund is Hotel Motel. That we were diving into a little bit here. So in terms of the breakdown of the 10.6 million, 5.5 million to capital, 4 million to waterfront debt service. And that debt service continues to run through roughly 2031, just for awareness. 750K towards tourism, and then we've got about 370,000 in fees to hotels in Hamilton County.
What does that mean?
There are certain fee with the hotel motel tax arrangement. There's certain fees that have to go back to hoteliers, and certain fees that have to be paid to Hamilton County. If you need more detail, I'm gonna have to refer
What
back.
does that even
to
mean?
The hotel establishments and STVRs get to keep 2% for their reporting efforts. They get to keep 2%. And then we always pay Hamilton County 1% when they collect money on our behalf and remit it.
It's a collection fee.
Collection fee.
Okay, all right.
There you go. And then the last one, even though it's other funds, it's a pretty important one, I think. Our wastewater fund, 152 million. This is an increase of about 10 million, 7%. So again, this is funded through sewer bills, so not tax dollars. So it's
That's about every
separate-
year increase, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Seven to nine, I think.
That's right. And this is 7 new positions. I did want to give just a high level on this because on this one, again, enterprise fund, different fund. I see Councilwoman Knoll shaking her head on my 7 new positions.
7 new, y'all.
It's a
She's
different.
adding up. What's that, about 10 new
That's
positions?
10 new positions. You want to give me grief for one? Seriously?
I'm not giving you any grief.
I mean, come on. Well, we're going to have a come to Jesus meeting on these.
This
For
is a
sure.
This is a different bucket of money.
No, 11 new ones.
She's adding them up.
Yes.
Ryan, is the 10 million increase, is that partially due to the consent decree requirements?
Yes. So, like I said before, there is a previously planned and scheduled rate increase here associated with this.
This is all consent decree.
This is all consent
and way
decree
back we knew this.
related, right?
Yeah. And we were briefed on this recently.
Yeah.
That's right. Now, for these new positions, I wanted to break this down because 5 of these new positions will actually save the city money. Actually, 6 of the 7 new positions will save the city money. So, 5 of them, hey guys, 5 of them are around an idea. I was so energized by this. 2 team members from Mox and Ben brought forward an idea that will save the city just under $300,000 a year by insourcing work that we were contracting out. So by insourcing that work, and it's essentially a sewer plant maintenance and pump station maintenance work that we were contracting out. By doing that in-house, the city and sewer bill ratepayers will save just under $300,000 a year. And we need to hire 5 people in order to do that. But fantastic work by these team members coming up with those ideas. That's a part of our cost incentive program, encouraging our team members to come up with that.
I know exactly your exact question.
We all had the same
I'm reading your
question.
mind, Chip.
Well, maybe, I don't know, but so you're saying it's paying for these new positions plus saving 300,000.
That's right.
Okay,
Okay, that's, yeah.
that was my
the
question.
So in other words, this cost savings, I mean, was another, well, if it's 6 positions, I mean, we're right at $1 million of difference. So whatever we were outsourcing must have been
Yeah, it was a lot.
in the millions
Yeah.
of dollars.
There's quite a bit, yeah. So I just wanted to highlight that. Really good work by those team members, and they will get. They are in the process of getting cost incentive checks for those ideas that they brought forward.
Because yeah, talk about that. We have a program.
We do. We have a cost incentive rewards program for employees that bring forward cost savings ideas and that pan out. They are eligible for a reward for that. So they will. Each of these team members will get $1,500 checks.
Can we hear a little bit more about what was changed? I think it's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, that was a year ago or so that y'all approved that program.
No,
he's talking about
I'm
this.
talking about the
What was
recent
the
change.
Oh,
The
this
recent
change.
idea. I'd like to hear more about the idea.
Okay.
I know about the program.
Can I bring that next week? I can bring
Yeah.
you a slide on that.
Yeah,
I'd
that'd
love
be fine.
to highlight their work on that.
That'd be fine.
Yeah, that'd be great. I have the details back at my desk, so. I won't do them justice by trying to remember it off the top of my head.
Okay, I've written down wastewater innovation.
All right, great.
Okay.
And then The other idea, the other position that will save the city money is essentially a project management position that is monitoring the consent decree work. Right now it's contracted out, but by bringing that in-house will also save the city money. The last position is a GIS position I mentioned that's at Technology Services, but is being funded by wastewater. So really those are the 7 positions I would highlight for y'all. So,
Was that monitoring position under Jacobs?
I don't remember exactly where the contractor position was. It might have been with Jacobs, it probably was, but we're bringing that in-house.
Ryan, I can help.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Okay, so, with any of our capital projects, we have a resident project representative, that's monitoring the contractor. It's usually a consultant. Jacobs does some of that, but other consultants do as well. But on any given project, it's about $300,000 a year for us to have that person out there doing that work. And we've long known that if we could hire in-house, we could actually save some money by having our own resident project representative on our capital projects. But it's a tough position to fill, but we hope to be able to fill it now that we've got it in the budget here. And it will save us money because we can then do our own inspection and our own project tracking, whereas right now we're just paying consultants for that work. So that's the gist of that.
Got it.
Are we looking in general at things that we can do in-house just as well?
I will tell you that the wastewater team has been the fastest to get on board with the cost savings incentive
Good.
program. So they are fast, quick adopters. Yes. So
We have discussions a lot about bringing in consultants when we have experts right here. You know, it's the joke about consultants across the board. So love for you to look and see how we can use our own very bright people
absolutely.
to do things. Anything else? Under other funds?
No, that's all for other funds. Yeah. then we
Let's
can-
take a 40-minute break for lunch. And when we come back, we'll do capital improvement plan, and we will go over the plan of work for